العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Now we want to get the second one. How do we reach the second one here? Oh, is it gone or what?
Yes, it's gone.
Gosh, why it's gone? Okay, طيب. What's this here? Bismillah. Our session today is on the Ijara hybrid, and Ijara is very flexible compared with sale, because if you remember, in sale, especially in Murabaha, when we arrange the sale in such a way that the bank wouldn't buy the commodity until it is, or unless it is requested by the customer. Now, here in Ijara, the condition that the second sale uh, cannot be concluded or contracted unless the commodity becomes in the hands of the bank. This condition is relaxed because of the nature of the usufruct or service that is subject of an ijara contract. Because for usufruct, when would you claim that you got all the usufruct? Only after you consume it. So this is why if you want to sell the usufruct that you owned, you can only sell it because before it is consumed, meaning that the condition of possession should not be there, but its availability instead. If the usufruct is available, like for instance, I rent an apartment and I decide to sell it, or take an actual example, when in many countries landlord like to take 1 year rent in advance for apartments, and at the same time most of the lessees are not able to pay 1 year in advance. So the bank may rent it for 1 year and sublease it to the person, to the lessee, the potential lessee, on monthly basis, and the bank would make profit through that. In this example, what is the time that a bank can resell or sublease, resell the usufruct or sublease the asset that he leased? Of course, it can be done before utilizing the usufruct, because the bank, when he makes this intermediary activity, does not intend to use the usufruct itself. It intends to give it to a customer, meaning that we can sublease it before it is consumed, as long as it is available. That is, the building exists that generates this usufruct, and apartment 29 of that building is what the bank rented from the landlord and paid for the whole year, and then he leases it. Of course, he would do that, or rather, the bank would do that. It would do that on request from the customer, because the customer liked that apartment number 29 and wanted to get it, but he is not able to pay 1 year in advance. So he wants to pay on monthly basis, and this is where the bank can interfere, meaning that the condition of possession here is replaced by the condition of availability of the usufruct. The usufruct is available since day one, and the bank took the key for that apartment. It can hand the key to the customer immediately at the same moment, and the rent will be transferred really to the customer from day one. What I mean by that is that the issue of of ijara is much easier to handle, to manipulate, to put changes in it here and there than the issue of the whatever of sale. Okay, so this is what we want to discuss, and we want to discuss here the hybrid ijara contract, and we will look also as in the second part of this session into contract for liquidity management. And then we will look at the justification at that time when we discuss that. So we have here the hybrid ijara contract, and we are going to discuss these five hybrid, or rather, sorry, we will begin with an introduction. How does ijara end? Of course, there are five options for an ijara to end. Grant the asset to the lessee. It may be granted as a gift, or it may be granted as it's just neglected by the lessor, because at that time the asset is worth nothing. All the economic life of the asset has been exhausted through the lease period, and it is worth only probably as scrap or as a very small amount of property that is almost worthless, and it doesn't matter. The lessor may throw it away, or if the lessee decide to take it, okay, take it. It's a burden on the lessor anyway. That is, once the economic life of that leased asset is completely exhausted through the lease. You may extend the lease for another period or another number of years if it is still carries that ability to generate more usufruct, or return the asset and walk out, give the asset back to the lessor, and that's it. The contract is over. Or sometimes you may buy the leased asset, or uh, at a given predetermined price, or it could be at a market price that will be agreed on at the time of this purchase at the end of the lease. The OIC Fiqh Academy, OIC refers to the Organization of Islamic Conference, resolved that and Awofi also, that I mean, this is the source of this actually. What is how do we, how does the ijara end? This is only a source of it, so you don't need it really. Okay, so we will discuss these 6 ways of manipulating the ijara so that we can benefit from it in the Islamic financial intermediation. Okay. Of course, the bank wouldn't like to make a lease on its own, and it would start always from the customer. And so the customer asked the bank to take a property, and with the promise that the customer would lease that property from the bank. It's a lease to the purchase orderer. Acquire this asset, and I will lease it from you or rent it from you for a period of time, long or short. So, as a definition, then, it's a financing contract consisting of a cash purchase of assets from a supplier by proxy, usually done through the purchase orderer, giving an agency to the purchase orderer to perform that purchase. And the purchase orderer would have promised already the bank or the financial intermediary that it will lease this asset from it. If we look quickly at the steps of this transaction, we will find order to purchase with a promise to lease. This is given by the customer to the bank. Step number two, uh, once this is approved, the bank would approve it from both Sharia point of view and uh, credit or credit risk point of view. From Sharia point of view, that the asset that is being leased is leased for an objective that is permissible in Sharia. So it is not, for instance, a bar that is being leased or any other place or machine that is used for hurting others. So it is approved from Sharia and approved from the risk management point of view. Then they make a wakala to the or an agency contract to the customer, and you arrange for securities, could be mortgage or a guarantee or a lien or a guarantor or any other any asset that is taken as a guarantee. Uh, the bank then buys from the designated supplier through its agent, buys that asset, and delivery of the asset is taken from the supplier by the agent. And so the asset will be now in the hand of the lessee. Can we sign the lease contract before the purchase or after it? In fact, yes, it can be signed even before the purchase of the asset. And once the lease contract is signed, can we call it, if it is before the purchase of the asset, it's suspended on the purchase of the asset, and it will the lease period will begin definitely after the purchase of the asset. uh, or it can be it can be signed just upon the purchase of the asset, either way. So this is another way of flexibility of ijara, that you can sign it for an asset that is not yet owned by the lessor, provided it is made suspended on the lessor becoming the authorized person to lease this asset. So the lease contract can be number 6, or it can be even number 2, or rather number 3, upon the approval of the transaction. Then the customer start paying the rentals. There is no need for transfer of title unless the lease the lessee wants to buy it. Then the amount of payment, periodical payment, or a balloon payment at the end. There will be a payment for the purchase of the asset, and then there will be a transfer of title. But when we take it in a simple way, lease to the purchase orderer, we don't need yet to have any transfer of title or any idea that the lessee would become an owner of this asset. It's simply lease to the purchase orderer. And definitely, financial intermediaries don't like to have this kind of contract because they don't like to end up with any transaction, end up with an asset instead of cash. They prefer to end up at the end of the transaction with cash all the time, simply because financial intermediaries deal in cash, and they have their depositors give them cash, and they like to be able to return cash to their depositors. But anyway, to make it simple, we have this the bank and supplier and lessee or purchase orderer. The lessee, who is the purchase orderer, would request the bank, and that is step number uh, one. Where is step number one? Yes, it is the blue one. Order to buy and promise to take on lease. Uh, Now, step number two will be the approval, credit approval, and Sharia approval. Then we make a lease contract. Then we make an agency with the lessee. And then comes number five, to make the buy from the supplier. And that buy could be done directly by the bank, or usually by virtue of the agency that is given to the supplier. And of course, after sale, there will be delivery to the agent, to the customer who is the agent of the bank. And the moment the asset becomes in the hand of the customer, the lease contract, which is number three here, that was signed already, would be effective because it was suspended on the asset become in the ownership of the Islamic bank. Uh, of course, usually the agent, once it inspect the asset and sees it that it is to the conditions that it wants, they accept delivery. They ask the bank to handle payment then to the supplier, and the bank will pay. And the final thing will be installment. But notice, in this simple form, there is no exit. So at the end of the lease, either the the asset would vanish, that is all the economic life of it is exhausted completely, is gone completely, or the asset will go back to the Islamic bank. And the Islamic bank doesn't like that usually. Now, are there any cases where the uh, that the asset would have been exhausted completely? Yes. Suppose that the bank got this asset on a license from a government or from a company, and this license is to be able to benefit from this asset for a period of time, say 10 years. And then The license is for 10 years, like we have it in extraction of minerals. Sometimes that a company would extract minerals or oil even for a period of time, and after that period of time will the license expires, so they own it only for that 25 years. After 25 years, the license would expire and cannot be in the hand of the Islamic Bank to begin with. And of course, suppose the Islamic Bank sublease it or give it to the customer for the whole period. So at the end of the period, that oil well is no more owned by the lessor and was given to the lessee for the whole period of the license. And at the end of it, it goes back to the government, or the oil well would have been by then dried and no oil can be extracted from it. That's the idea here, where you may make that kind of transaction and you don't need an exit because the nature of it has يعني like self exiting in that sense. So this is the case of it. Of course, case number B here, if it is accompanied with a condition that the customer would buy this asset and the asset would still have economic life, would buy it at the end of the lease or during the lease by inflating the regular installment to pay a larger amount than the required rent. So the amount of installment will be a lot more than the rent, and that part that is more would be assigned to purchase part of the asset from the Islamic Bank. And in this case, there will be a kind of a quit claim at the end of the period of the lease, and it becomes owned by the customer itself. So, because the bank would have recovered during the lease period the profit it aims at making, which is the rent and also the price of the asset itself, and the asset because the installment were each one of them a lot more than the rent alone. So this is case number B, where the it is purchase to the lease purchase to the purchase orderer, and very often this is called إجارة منتهية بالتمليك, meaning إجارة ending with ownership, and the steps will be exactly the same as we got them, and there is nothing beyond that. When you use this in housing, it is used very often in house financing, and we have a company in the United States, a famous company, and a big company really. It started kind of small with simply about $5 million, but it grew a lot, and it is now a company that talks in several hundred million dollars. It uses this kind of contract exactly for house financing. It is specialized in Islamic house financing. But let's take a little look at this. Can this company sell the contract after it makes a contract with me, for instance? Can it sell it to an investor? And even if this investor is a conventional bank or It's any other organization, a retirement fund, or a simple investor. Yes, it can, because when it sells it, it is selling really the real estate property, the property it owned, that it gave me on lease ending with ownership, but it still owned a large part of it. So it sells its part. When it sells its part, it would be required to hand over to the new buyer, to the investor, all the promissory notes. And notice the promissory notes are the future rent until the expiry of the lease agreement. And also, in each installment, there is a part for purchasing part of the asset. So, in other words, recovering the asset, the amount paid by the bank to obtain this asset. So it can be, and this is becomes really like a form or a kind of discounting. You get promissory notes for say 120,000, but you paid only 80,000 for that piece of property, because these promissory notes include both the future rent for all the future period of the lease, and they also include the recovery of the principal. And so part of this total of the promissory note, say that the 40,000 will be the rental part, that is the profit that will be made by the investor, and the 80,000 will be recovering of the original amount invested. So this is, it becomes exactly like the discounting. When you take some promissory notes and discount them in a bank, the bank will give you the present value of it. And here the investor pays the present value, which is the 80,000, and takes all these promissory notes for the coming all period throughout the lease life. Okay, let's take another version now, which is the buy lease back. Let's suppose a company has a cash crunch. It needs some cash. And one way of obtaining cash is to sell its own headquarters, but it wants to remain in the same place. Would it be then permissible to combine these two contracts together? I'll sell you this property provided you lease it to me for the coming 5 years or 10 years or any period of time. This is a transaction that can be done, and usually it is done to obtain cash, because the cash amount will be a large lump sum for the value of the property, and then you rent it, say, on monthly basis or quarterly basis. You pay a small amount each quarter, and you don't need to move out of this property, because you are renting it now, and people know that this business is in this place, and we don't want to move out of it. So buy lease back is a way, another flexible way for making the derived from the lease agreement. And the way we can describe the steps of it, again, it's offered to sell for cash and lease back. That's step number one. Step number two, approval, and both Sharia wise and credit wise. Of course, if the company is headquarters, or suppose it's a liquor shop, then the Islamic bank wouldn't accept from Sharia point of view to obtain it as a liquor bar, a liquor shop. Number three will be cash sale contract and accompanied with payment. Then number four would be payment for the cash for the sale, and then lease it back from it, and there will be promissory notes and regular payment of the rental. Now, as it is noticed, there is no exit here, and definitely an Islamic bank wouldn't like to go into this transaction unless it has on hand an investor who would accept to take it from the Islamic bank almost immediately and uh, pay the cash to the Islamic bank and take this as an investment of its own. But the Islamic bank like to end up with cash all the time to have an exit from the transaction in the form of cash. So this kind of transaction does not offer this cash. But some practitioner made it with a way that is, from Sharia point of view, it's kind of trick and misconduct, really. And it is called the Ina in Sharia. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that we should avoid Ina sale. The concept of Ina sale is when you add to the lease a buyback. You bought this asset from X and you are selling it back sometime in the future. Meanwhile, during that period, you are taking rent from it. So leasing it during the period until you sell it back to the same owner or same original owner. This is not permissible, and according to the resolution of the OIC Fiqh Academy, this is considered as riba. The lease that you take, even you call it lease, it is in fact interest, because the amount is going to be paid back to you, say 5 years from down the road from now, and meanwhile you will take this amount as under the name of lease, but it is in fact riba. This becomes like a loan for interest exactly, but you made it in a form of buy, lease, buy back, and that is not Sharia compliant. Similarly, you have a transaction that is being practiced in the market: lease back. You lease an asset for, say, 10 years, for a longer period, and you pay the amount of the lease once in advance, and then you lease it back to the same lessor, but you lease it back on monthly basis or on quarterly basis. This is again is ijara ina, the same kind of applies to it. It is not Sharia compliant, yet there are some practices that do that, and this is in violation definitely of our Sharia. Now, we noticed in the house financing example that uh, the asset that is being financed as a house to a customer can be sold by the Islamic intermediary, financial intermediary, because they need to recycle their cash. They got cash from the investor, they recycle it. And this is what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in the United States do in-house financing. These two banks were established in the late 1930s by the government of the United States, but with time, the larger chunk of the owners of these banks were sold to the public. The government still own a big part of it, and it is the largest owner, the federal government of these banks. And these banks, the objective of them was to buy really the house financing contract from banks. Well, that all banks in America are interest-based banks, and this transaction has been all the time as interest-based banks. But over the last about 30 years, really, to my knowledge, I can put the date exactly after 9/11, really, because during 9/11 we were discussing this matter with some banks, and after it was stopped for a few months because of the Islamophobia that came with the incidents, which is definitely a criminal incident, no doubt about that, of 9/11. Was a criminal incident which is not approved in our Sharia at all. But anyway, because of the Islamophobia that accompanied that, this kind of practice was stopped for only a few months. Then it was resumed at the beginning of the year 2000. And the transaction was such that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac decided to accept Islamic house financing contract based on the concept I mentioned of ijara, ending with ownership. And with this concept, both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac accept to buy the property from the finance companies that provide this transaction. To my knowledge, today, there is only one or two banks that practice this transaction. I think one in Detroit and one in Chicago. No other banks, although it is permissible according to the law of the United States, the federal and usually also state laws, because state laws only copy from the federal law anyway. So it is permissible to be practiced by any bank that is إجارة منتهية بالتمليك or إجارة ending with ownership, in-house financing. And when the companies that do now, there is a big company in Washington area, in Virginia actually, or licensed in Virginia, that makes this kind of contract, ijara ending with ownership, lease purchase kind of financing. And it is Sharia compliant 100%. And it takes I mean, they recycle the funds immediately by selling these contract. And when they sell these contract, it means they are selling their share in the ownership of of these houses. They sell them to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in order to recycle the funds, be able to finance more customers. And this is what they do. And these companies grew a lot. So that is really equivalent to discounting because the objective of discounting is to get cash from the promissory notes in order to give more financing to other customers. And this is exactly what is being done with this إجارة ending with ownership or إجارة منتهية بالتمليك. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac accept from the Islamic finance companies and banks that practice this kind of contract, they accept from them these contract the same way they accept from conventional other interest-based banks the house financing, which is a good help for the Muslim community in the United States being able to have more facilities from the Islamic finance companies on this matter. Now I want to discuss contracts for liquidity management. You know that liquidity management is needed. Customers sometimes they need liquidity, and banks also need liquidity sometimes to finance new customers. Same way also banks there will be demand on deposit withdrawal from them, so they again they may need cash. They may have sometimes a crunch cash. Or also, when they find some new opportunities and they don't have immediate cash, they kind of feel that they are losing opportunities. To grab such opportunities, they may need cash. And sometimes they may be short on the reserve requirements. Suppose all of a sudden, for an Islamic bank, the central bank increased the reserve requirement and they need quick cash to be able to respond to this increase. And definitely, then there is a need for liquid cash in Islamic banks, the same way as it happens by individuals and companies. Sometimes individuals and companies require liquid cash. So, how do we handle this issue of liquid cash in Islamic finance? So, I am going to kind of restrict the issue now to discussing the need for cash in Islamic banks, that is, in Islamic financial intermediaries. And there are these five ways that are 100% Sharia compliant, and you can have cash through them. Of course, you may have heard of the word tawarruq, that some banks and unfortunately some Sharia advisors, out of their kind of either low morality or low knowledge, they gave fatwa that tawarruq is permissible, whereas tawarruq really is considered exactly the same as riba by the OIC Fiqh Academy in its resolution that was taken in the year 2009. Clearly, it says this is same as riba. And so it is definitely prohibited and non-acceptable in our Sharia. But unfortunately, some Islamic banks practice it, and some and their Sharia advisors kind of approved of it. I argue that this is really not justified because they can use either of these five contracts to help them acquire liquidity without violating Sharia. These are have no question about their Sharia permissibility, and we will discuss them one by one and look at their Sharia compatibility. Okay. Murabaha line of credit. The idea here, you need any Islamic bank would need to make this arrangement available through a master contract, a master agreement with another bank. And let's call them big bank and a small bank, big bank and a small brother, a younger brother. So the big brother and the younger brother. The big brother could be a central bank or could be a conventional bank, need not to be Islamic really. But the idea of it here that when I need to finance on Murabaha, I want you to support me, Mr. Big Bank, in financing on Murabaha. So I'll buy the commodity that is requested from me by a customer. I buy it to you as an agent of you, Mr. Bigger Bank, and I buy it from you, Mr. Bigger Bank, and you pay the money either through me or directly to the supplier, and I sell it to my customer who requested it from me to begin with. I would sell it to it. So, as a definition, then it is an arrangement of providing credit facility by a larger bank or a central bank through a series or one even transaction, but usually they make a master agreement that whenever we need that, we apply it through a series of murabaha financing to an IB, a smaller, the younger brother, which is it uses to buy goods ordered by its customers on murabaha basis. The objective is to provide liquidity facility to an Islamic bank that needs liquidity from a big brother. So here how it appears. It is very interesting, really, and it is Sharia compliant. It's like a double murabaha instead of murabaha. So if we start from the customer requesting from the Islamic bank, the intermediary Islamic bank, a customer request from it certain goods from a given supplier. So the Islamic bank would say yes, applying this already existing agreement with the larger bank or with the central bank, although it says yes, although it doesn't have adequate liquidity for that, but through this agreement will obtain the liquidity, and of course the bank will do its homework by approval that it is Sharia compliant and everything. And the credit, now here we'll look at the credit. Whose credit uh, matters for the large bank or the big brother or the central bank? Is it the credit of the customer, credit worthiness of the customer, or credit worthiness of the intermediary Islamic bank? Definitely, it is the credit worthiness of the intermediary Islamic bank, not the customer, because who will be the debtor to the big bank? The debtor is the smaller Islamic bank, the Islamic bank that is dealing with the customer. And the customer is a creditor to that Islamic bank. So we don't worry at all about the final customer. We worry in the big Islamic bank about our own customer, and our own customer is the intermediary Islamic bank. By the same token, the maturity of the debt that this murabaha to the intermediary Islamic bank creates, the maturity of this debt on the Islamic bank need not to be exactly the same maturity on the between the intermediary Islamic bank and the customer. So the customer may be given maturity of 3 months, but the Islamic bank, intermediary Islamic bank, keeping in its mind that I may need to use this fund for another customer also, may request a maturity of 6 months, not 3 months. So it takes maturity of 6 months from the larger bank. Of course, it pays for that. There will be a profit that is collected by the larger bank. The rate of profit, say, between the intermediary bank and the customer will be 9%, and it would be 6% between the intermediary bank and the larger bank, according to their master agreement. And then the intermediary bank, once it is requested by the customer, it asks for that same kind of goods and its quantity, not the maturity of it, the quantity. It asks for it from the larger bank. It buys these goods on behalf of the larger bank, buys it from the larger bank by virtue of the wakala or agency agreement, and the larger bank may pay to the supplier, either directly to the supplier, or it could be even through the intermediary bank. Then the bank will, once it becomes an owner, it will sell it to its customer. So and this is done just in minutes. You need not to be any. We talk about them more than we apply them. We apply them actually in minutes. Doesn't need much time. The time for talking about them is kind of longer. So this is murabaha line of credit. Now, like murabaha, we can make musharaka line of credit, or could be mudaraba, because musharaka and mudaraba are equal, except that in musharaka there is interference in management, and usually you keep this. You don't like to interfere in management, but you keep it just in case there is trouble, so you step in and interfere. So musharaka and mudaraba, line of credit, are the same from the point of view of real application. Now, but here there is something really interesting. Musharaka line of credit. In musharaka, both parties, the big bank and the small bank, will contribute management and principal. Okay, now at each point of time, we can know what is the equity of the intermediary bank, because it makes its account and it has a position, daily position. So on every day, we know how much is its equity. And we give the intermediary bank, we give it kind of line of credit on musharaka. You can withdraw at any time from the big brother or deposit to your account with the big brother any amount within a maximum limit of $100 million. And this agreement goes on, suppose, for a whole year. So on day one, we know what is the equity of the intermediary bank. We don't know how much will be the equity of the big brother. The equity of the big brother will be the amount you withdraw from it. So here, kind of overdraft, really. You withdraw money and you don't have balance in your account. And that will be considered as capital of the big brother in the business of the Islamic bank. So, but the capital here is not predetermined. Is that permissible in Sharia? Yes, it is permissible. And there is a rule in Sharia that requires, when you create partnership between two entities or even more, what is necessary is to know how much is the contribution, the capital contribution of each partner at the time of profit distribution. If we agree that we are going to distribute profit at the end of each 3 months, or at an accounting period, accounting cycle of 1 year. So by the end of the year, you need to know how much is the principal contribution of each party. So when you take and give back, take and give back, take and give back, we can calculate these take, get back, withdraw and deposit back. We can calculate them on the basis of dollar day. So we consider how many days each withdrawal between the date of withdrawal and the date of closing the account. And we calculate the date also between each deposit you put in that musharaka account. You return, in other words, that when you have extra fund, you don't need them, you return it. We can calculate the dollar day of these deposits. And at the end of the uh, accounting cycle, we look at the plus minus algebraic total of the contribution of the big bank. The small bank, we know its contribution. When we started this agreement, it was the equity was X, and this X, of course, goes by the whole number of days of the accounting cycle. If the accounting cycle is 1 year, so we take the equity of the bank for multiplied by 365, and whatever we took, each withdraw and each deposit is multiplied by the remaining number of days until the end of the accounting cycle. And we know, divide the total, the algebraic total, because we have plus and minus. We divide the algebraic total by 365, and we know what is the dollar amount contribution of the big brother in this kind of musharaka or partnership. So it is not difficult at all. And accounting system today give us that opportunity. But notice here, in musharaka line of credit, you can use the cash for anything. Here it's a cash you take from the big brother. Whereas in the murabaha line of credit, you don't take cash from the big brother. You buy a commodity on behalf of the big brother and you buy it from it. So you take the commodity or the asset that is requested by your customer from you to buy on finance, on murabaha. So here in murabaha line of credit, you cannot use that kind of facility for, say, increasing your reserve requirements in the central bank. But you can use this facility, musharaka line of credit, for anything you can use cash for, including increasing your reserve requirements. So the Sharia base for it is that what is needed is to know the capital contribution by the time of the profit calculation. If we calculate every year, so we need to know it only by that time, and by that time we know that. So we can distribute profit between the two partners in a correct way and in a Sharia compliant way. We can have also a ceiling on profit. That's fine. And the pre-known, predetermined, pre-agreed on profit distribution ratio should be there. And that is so simple. We take it here. How is it? It works. We have a big bank, big brother, or central bank, and an Islamic bank. We have a master agreement that arrange this transaction between them, and we open an account for it, call it musharaka account in the central bank of or in the big brother bank. Now, withdrawal and deposits will be calculated until the maturity, the end of the accounting cycle. There we calculate profit on basis of dinar day or dollar day capital contribution of both. And that is simple, and we distribute profit at the rate that we agreed on in advance. So this is a second Sharia compliant way we can finance cash, not commodities, just cash needs for an Islamic bank if it has this kind of agreement pre-arranged with the central bank or with another bank that is usually bigger. A third way for obtaining cash is the sale of lease contract. Now, we noticed that in the before in the housing financing, the idea here is when you sell lease contract, in fact, you are selling real estate. You are not selling, or you are selling assets that are being leased. So you are not selling debts, and sale of assets that are leased is permissible. uh, and you cannot put with them any murabaha contract, because murabaha contract create only debts. So there will be no debts added to them. Only lease contract can be packed together, sold to a bigger bank as the Islamic finance provider in-house financing in America do with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So sale of lease contract could take the form of securitization, not necessarily the kind of form of discounting. Securitization. We can package lease contract together for say $50 million and sell them in the market as sukuk. The purchaser of these sukuk will earn the rent that is generated by these real asset and will recover also their investment through the periodical payment, because part of it is rent and part of it is really purchase of the real estate property. So you can use it as sukuk. So you can refinance either from banks through discounting or refinance from the public through issuance of sukuk. Now, if you can sell the lease contract, of course, you can also sell any musharaka or mudaraba or mudaraba contract that you have. Because when an Islamic bank gives musharaka financing or mudaraba financing, it owns part of that business. And this ownership can be given to some other investor, another bank, bigger bank or so. So same way it can be sold and you can obtain cash. What I mean here that with these five, and this is the fifth one, with these five tools that we have on hand, we really don't need to go to the tool that is described by the OIC Fiqh Academy as not permissible and as pure riba, which is the tawarruq tool. So we don't need to take the tawarruq tool. The fifth one is reversed murabaha. Let me start with an assumption. Suppose an Islamic bank wants to buy a new building to make it a new branch. It is expanding and creating a new branch in another town or whatever. So this new building that it wants to obtain, it doesn't want to hold in it its own liquid funds. So instead of holding this liquid fund, they need the liquid fund for using it for their own customers. So they come to a big investor and tell that big investor, well, listen, we need to buy this building, but how about you buying it and selling it to us on installment? In other words, here, instead of the bank giving murabaha, the bank takes murabaha for its own use. Like the customer coming, you want to buy a car, comes to the Islamic bank, and the bank buys it and sell it on installment to the customer. Same way, we can ask this depositor or big depositor or investor or a friend of the bank, ask him, buy this asset and we will buy it from you on installment and give you profit, say 7%. And so this is the reversed murabaha, and it is definitely halal. Why do we do that? We do that to keep our liquidity available. We don't want to use our liquidity in this building. We want to keep it available for financing our customers. So this is a beautiful way to do that. Let's take another example, which is shown here on the screen. Suppose we have 10 customers that need a total number of goods, different kind of things, and they make a total of 500 of $5 million. So we have in our pipeline these customers that need financing for 5 million. We come to a big depositor or a big investor. Well, listen, mister, we have this chance. Would you give us reverse murabaha? We'll buy these goods that are requested by our customers, 5 million dinar. We buy them for you on your behalf as an agent, and we buy them from you. We give you 6% profit on that, and we use these goods, that this package of goods, for our customers. So whatever we have in the pipeline, we finance it from the deposit of this investor, and we sell them to our customers, say at 9%. We got them from that investor for 6%. Would that be permissible? Yes, of course. And at all time, any Islamic bank would have all the time a request for murabaha in its pipeline, in the process of being worked out. And then we can take it either from an investor or from another Islamic bank, from a bigger Islamic bank. This is reversed murabaha. The value of it, or the Sharia value of it, is exactly like murabaha. If the bank can give on murabaha, it can take on murabaha. And it can take on murabaha goods that it is going to sell on murabaha to its customers. It's that simple, and it becomes really, if you notice, like murabaha line of credit. But the difference between them is very minor. Murabaha line of credit requires prior arrangement, but here, all of a sudden, we have some a group of customers. They don't know each other, but the total of their request is 5 million. So we go to either a big bank or a good investor that we know, and tell him, okay, give us the 5 million and we'll give you this profit on them on the basis of reversed murabaha, and we will arrange it for you completely. That's perfect. With this, I conclude our session of today, and I open the floor for any questions. The objective of this section B of this session is we really don't need tawarruq or anything that is not Sharia compliant. And those bankers, Islamic bankers, who cheat their Sharia advisors and tell them it is necessary, it is not necessary. Do your homework and you will find it not necessary. I know Islamic banks that never make any tawarruq and they are surviving, and I know that at times they needed to use the one of these five facilities that I mentioned. I advised a bank myself to use one of them, and it used one of them when it needed cash, and it worked perfect. It is incorrect then that, oh, tawarruq is necessary. Tawarruq is not necessary at all. So please, the floor is open for your questions. And if you don't have a question, I'll quit. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. Okay, questions open for questions. Any questions, guys? Any questions?
We are good, teacher. Alhamdulillah.
Good. خلاص. Do you understand them well? So make the homework on this then. يلا بارك الله
Inshallah.
بكم.
Inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So I'll leave, stop sharing first, and then I'll see you next week, inshallah. We have 4 more sessions, and inshallah we will close. And by the way, Hiba, yani find some kind of form for the certificate and send it to me to check it, and then I'll send you my signature on them that you can put them on all of them. Okay? Assalamu alaikum. Okay, I leave now then. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام.